Welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. My name is Ben. To my left is David Pierce, and Luke, of course, is straight in front of me. It's so
Hello,
great.
everybody.
Fellas, I can't tell you how great it is to have you with me this evening.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
So
I'm
Ben,
so
why
lucky.
is it whenever Luke speaks, you always go on ESPN?
Because
What's
the
the
brain needs
ESPN?
stimulus, like the stomach needs food. And when Luke speaks, this is what I hear.
Waffle, 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 waffle.
Like a
Waffle,
small
waffle.
alpacan goat foraging for
Hey,
nuts
that's
and
what I'm
berries.
here for. You are welcome.
Yeah.
You are welcome.
Yeah.
Provoke and Inspire podcast, calling followers of Jesus to radical faith outside of the church. Would you rate and review this podcast? We need it. Oh, yes. It helps increase the exposure. And for the third time, Luke loves exposure. So come
Thank
on.
you.
Do it for us. Do it on iTunes.
Exactly.
Do it on Stitcher. Do it on Spotify. Do it on Schmoozle. Do it on Orangutan. Doing it on
Dribble.
Do Mersh.
Bleemish, Lego, Franzer, and Hyperflick.
Dummkopf.
Especially leave a Dummkopf. We love that. Hyperflick is a great place to
Yep.
leave a review.
Snaggers.
Yep, that's enough of that.
And if you have a band, that other one is good too.
We're very excited about today's podcast. We have an incredible guest. His name is Justin Brierley. He is the host of the Unbelievable podcast. No, that is not an adjective.
Unbelievable.
That is the name of the podcast. It's
That's right.
unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And it is.
Yeah, it really is. The entire premise is bringing, it's sort of a debate format. He brings on, it started, I think, with Christians and non-Christians, atheists and theists, debating the key questions surrounding that topic, but it has since evolved into lots of different kinds of conversations within the Christian world.
I mean,
politics.
he's had Jordan Peterson on, John Lennox, some of the top.
William
William
Lane
Lane
Craig and the
Craig.
Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Willard Scott,
John Lennox.
Yeah, Donald Stingenhauser friends.
Franz
C.S.
Snorby.
Lewis. He had C.S. Lewis. Oh, no, wait. No, he's alive.
Yeah,
Okay.
Genghis Khan, Mount Olympus. He had inanimate objects
Ollie
on.
Thornton. He had
Yeah.
Ollie Thornton on.
Steve's, anyway. All right, so Justin Brierley, he's coming on the podcast. We're going to talk about lots of stuff, our culture, the role of apologetics in culture, kind of the trends and things that we can uniquely speak into as followers of Jesus. You're going to want to hear this. Oh, yes. But before we get to that, everyone, I want you to stand up, get a snack, do anything. Just this is your opportunity to really get ready for the Justin Brierley podcast, because we have the
David's Random Story.
So anyway, there's all these arbitrary rules, like when you're going through security at
Wait,
the
you're going to
airport.
say what? Just in general?
Well, so you go to the
In
airport.
an airport,
life.
maybe?
They go to you go to
Arbitrary rules in life.
so you go to an airport and there'll be like a sign and it'll say like no hand grenades, or like when they're
Or
like when you're going through
toilet.
or like when they interview you. Have you ever had that? They interview you. So
No.
you go,
Yeah. Do you have a nuclear warhead?
do you
in your
have
bag?
any? Yeah, or like, are you carrying drugs?
Are you
like-
the owner of a Belgian Schnauzer?
Yes, I am carrying drugs, and I am a terrorist.
They always say it in the affirmative.
And if you do that, they take you to the little room, don't they? If you answer wrong.
I wouldn't know, Luke.
Dude,
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
dude, the room is tiny.
So anyway,
You can
I was.
barely- it's so awkward because you and the security guard can barely fit in there, and he's all draped around you, and you're like, bro, can you move?
I
And
know,
it's like,
but where's?
remove your passport
like,
from your
"Look at
pants,
me."
and you're like, I can't
like,
get
he
to my
gets the light.
pants.
And you ever notice how you get
Like,
these
you want a cigarette?
these flight attendants and
Sure.
they're like really in a bad mood, and so they don't want to do anything, and they go, hey, would it be all right if I had some coffee? And then they bring you like cold coffee. I mean, it's like, come on.
Right.
What are we talking about?
And I've
I
heard
don't
it's
know,
really dirty,
But anyway,
the coffee.
so I was flying to Iraq from Germany with you, Ben. I think you
As
were
you
with
do.
me.
You, Ben,
Yes, and we were going to do a
our
tour
Irish
there
compatriot.
with no longer music.
Yes.
And it was weird because, look, what are you doing? Stop it. So anyway, it was really weird because we were, what is going on?
Keep going.
So
Sorry.
we're getting ready to we're flying to Iraq, and no one was doing nothing. I'd go, could I have like a coffee or whatever?
No one was doing nothing.
But then there was like, it was weird. It was like there was anarchy on the plane. People started just getting up and like going into the galley and just helping themselves. And I have this picture of the flight attendants pushing the tray down the center of the plane with these two kids sitting on it.
Yeah,
Was it
bobsled
flight
style.
attendants?
It was
wow.
weird.
I haven't seen something that wacky since Cool Runnings.
So I thought,
I've never
I said
heard
to
of
Ben, that's it. So I just got up and went into the galley
Jamaica's
myself.
got the bobsled team.
And I just started looking around, and there's another random guy in there.
With the one Senka.
And I said, hey, do you know where I can get the drinks? And he's like, I think in here. So we're like rummaging in the galley to get stuff.
Where's the champagne?
And those, does anyone else find that the drawers in a plane always look like a safe from the 1800s? Like there's just weird aluminum compartments.
Yes.
But it was also weird because like in the toilets on the plane, it was like people were not aiming for the toilet. It was
Yeah, it's like someone picked up a toddler and then they got on themselves on one of those whirly saucers in a jungle gym area,
What?
and they
Yeah.
just whirled
You
around
guys
while
live
aiming
in
a
other
toddler.
world to me.
And let's
seriously.
just say it may have been coming out of bull spouts.
Seriously, it was you didn't want to go in there. But then
Wow.
we're just getting ready to land the plane.
This story is not very culturally sensitive.
And then I'm not saying anything about any culture. But so then as we were getting ready to land, people just got up while the plane was still in the air, just getting their bags out of the
Yeah.
overhead. It was-
Yeah, sometimes you have an overly eager, group of passengers, and that you'll hit the ground like, and
Yeah.
they'll do the double bounce like, and then they'll pop up, they'll spring up, like there's
they'll
always
clap.
they're always in such a hurry, even though the clapping's weird. It's like, oh, should I have clapped? How worried should I have been?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm always a little freaked out by that. It's like, what, did we have a 50-50 chance here? Was that a coin toss?
Exactly.
But yeah, these people, they didn't even wait for the double bounce. They just they were on their feet in the aisles before the plane had even landed. It was
Yeah,
like,
insane.
okay, that's a little bit eager, especially because we got to get that door open. It's not like you're going to jump through that tiny window.
So it was a bit crazy, but it prepared us for the tour that was to come. And so that's, I guess, if you're gonna,
Should have been a foreshadowing, or
it was a foreshadowing. It was like a
it's like a
a
pre-hosing.
pending premonition.
It's like a pre-hosing.
It was
What
like
were
a
the air
lucid
stewardess-
lunging.
It was like a
Stewardesses doing?
re-awakening.
It was like a
So-
sliding, slithering.
I'm guessing the staff people were German, right? So what are they
There's
doing
Lufthansa.
with this chaos?
Gunther and Dieter were like, man, I have not been like this since that time in Dusseldorf where the dance rave got canceled.
Yeah, it was party, tanz.
Hey,
Wow.
for those of you who are like, wait, was this going to be with Justin Brierley? Yes, it will be.
Yes.
So
Yes, it
hang
will
in
be.
there.
That's why.
Hang in there.
That's why we don't have him come on at the
Look,
beginning. So
the day
we
is
spare
always
them
darkest
this,
before the dawn.
Then
The
Then it
rose
gets
is always
good.
most prickly upon pluckage.
The mist always rises before the vamp.
The beagle is always most shorn before the start of the adventure.
The tick always crawls before it blemishes.
Yeah, so just hang in there, folks, because we're getting there. Justin Brierley, unbelievable. Hey, Justin, if you listen back to this, first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all,
I apologize as well.
let's bring him on, guys.
Yeah, let's do it. And Justin, don't judge us by the intro, okay? We love you, man.
Mm.
I think we're live. We're rolling. Justin, thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great. It's great to be with you guys. And I was just listening to your last podcast, or the one that was most recently on with Brian Head Welch and so on. I loved it. It was great.
Brian Reese.
I haven't had a chance to listen to many, but you can count me as a new listener from now on.
Great.
Oh,
I
brilliant.
specifically said to Luke before we started that we tend to have very awkward introductions to guests. And I said, Luke, I think I've identified the problem. You tend to make some sort of noise right as I'm trying to introduce the guest,
Yeah.
we all freeze, and
Yeah,
then
that's
everyone's
true.
uncomfortable. But he
Yeah.
did it anyway, and yet I think we're doing all right. We're
I
off to a
did.
decent start.
Yeah,
Hey,
I
so
like
just-
responding to what people say. You know, it's just so
Yeah.
important.
I'd say this is very smooth as far as I'm concerned. You
So,
guys
so Justin, you listened to the latest podcast. Honestly, don't you think I was the best one on the podcast? You can be on, don't you think? Honestly.
yeah, for sure. There was no doubt at
Yeah.
all in my mind that
Yeah.
you are the best of all the presenters on that
Yeah.
podcast.
You
It
know,
is-
sure.
I'm not going to lie to you that we have now tipped the scales and we're at 2-2 UK to US. I'm a little on edge, and
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
as comfortable as it's like we've rolled back the clock to the
Yes!
years of yesterfar, and I'm a
At
little nervous
last.
right now.
It's the British takeover. Amazing.
Oh, it is amazing
Oh,
indeed.
Finally,
So anyway,
finally,
thank
we've
you.
got some more, you know, culture in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, I'm hoping that at some point we'll tip it all the way to it just being UK hosts
Yeah.
on the Provoke and Inspire podcast.
Exactly.
It'll be
We'll
the most
take over.
pleasant world takeover that has ever happened. You know, we won't even be that mad about it.
Justin,
How
I
could
just
we be?
need that because Ben wouldn't let me say stuff at the beginning, but I think I've waited long enough now. I just want to say it's unbelievable to have you on
Oh,
the
come
podcast.
on.
Man.
It's awesome.
Oh, that was.
That was that.
No.
I guess
I'm a fan. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, and I bet that's the first time he's ever heard that too, right,
First time I've
Justin?
ever heard that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh man! All right, I'm going to take over. You can now understand my hesitation with Luke's contributions. But all right, so here's the thing: I like to try to get a sense for what's going on in culture, and when we have guests come in, where's kind of that intersection that I think is unique and interesting for our listeners. And so I don't know if you heard it, but there was this very short interview with Obama recently, and he kind of called out this political correct culture. You know, he said that we need to stop being so concerned with being, quote, woke, which is what the kids say, I think. And essentially just relax on people, you know, this cancel culture and this critical attitude. And someone says a little bit of the wrong thing, or they show a human moment, and we instantly come down on them.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question I have for you is someone who's essentially, you know, for years facilitated civil discourse and great conversation. Do you feel like there's a counterbalance happening where maybe there's a felt need for genuine conversation, or in your mind are things just as it kind of appears, just polarized, and people really are as disinterested as they've always been?
Yeah, I saw that. I did see that bit of that interview with Obama that you mentioned, and I really resonated with what he said. I think we do live in a kind of gotcha culture where people are basically just waiting for people to make a mistake so that they can crucify them for it. And that's just the way it is at the moment, because it is so polarized. So whether it be LGBT or politics or religion or whatever it might be, it's almost as though people are just waiting for people to make a mistake so that they can get really indignant and angry about it online somewhere. And I think what he said was very true as well. Simply making a big deal about it on Twitter and complaining does not equal activism. That's a very lazy form of activism. And actually, I think it's just so commonplace nowadays that most people are actually, to some extent, getting tired of it. Sadly, we're just about to go into a general election season here in the UK. It's very unusual to have one during the winter, but the current Brexit crisis and everything has sort of sparked a new election campaign for us. And I can just see it being like this for the next, couple of months, basically, that it's going to be he said, she said, and everyone trying to get one over on the other. And it does get very tiring, actually. So, yeah, with the show, with Unbelievable, I have tried to counter that to some extent, to kind of move away from that soundbite culture, that polarization, and get two people having a more of a long form conversation where you actually get to the heart of some of these matters. And that's not to say they don't, still disagree, but I think we do try, by and large, to model disagreement more agreeably. And in the process, I think you do learn a lot more. You generate more light than heat, hopefully, in the process of that. And I think there is a lot of people craving it, who are basically tired of the kind of culture, as you say, where everyone's leaping down each other's throats because they put a foot wrong in some way. And yeah, I think people are feeling we need to be more generous to each other if we're going to have a hope of actually getting on together.
How is the sort of more organic reaction to your show? I have to be honest, I listened to a lot of the episodes, but I haven't really maybe engaged on social media or sort of the discussions that maybe happen around your episodes. Do those tend to be friendly, or do they tend to be sort of what you see more typically on social media or commenting sections?
It depends a little bit on the platform. I tend to find with the Christian and atheist discussions, if I post them on Facebook, you'll get a lot of atheists getting on and being quite snarky sometimes, and equally you can get Christians doing that as well. And that tends to bring out those kind of characters, the extremes, if you like. And it's a more difficult place, I often find, to have more nuanced and interesting discussions. That's not to say they don't happen; they do here and there. Twitter equally can be a bit like that, but I tend to get a bit more of a range of interesting responses actually on Twitter from people. Generally speaking, I tend to find, actually, it's funnily enough, it's in sort of direct emails to the show that people do the most opening up and kind of are the most honest, really, because they're not, in a sense, on display there. They're not doing it for a public audience. And I've had some of my best conversations just directly with people over a string of emails, and that's great. But social media, sadly, does tend to lend itself to that kind of polarization. I don't know how to counter that, because I just think the anonymity of social media to some extent, and the one-upmanship that it tends to breed, unfortunately tends to militate against having really kind of generous conversations. So nothing ultimately beats people getting together and talking things through.
Justin, on the email thing, have you had people respond like who are not of faith, and because of the conversations and stuff? I imagine you've had a lot of people writing in who maybe come from an atheist background and stuff, and they're actually finding faith through it. Have you, and you're talking about these one-on-one conversations you're having by email, have you had much experience ministry-wise of just seeing people respond through those emails and conversations?
Yeah. I mean, every week people are getting in touch, and a lot of them obviously are Christians, and they want to get in touch about the show and have some feedback. And some of them are Christians, who've gone through seasons of doubt or questioning, and they maybe have found the show helpful and want to kind of engage about that. But certainly a lot of non-Christians who get in touch on a regular basis, and a lot of whom I would say I developed a friendship with, even if we haven't necessarily met, but we've kept in touch in different ways over the years. And I have seen, it's lovely when you do see some of those go along a path towards faith, and that's always a blessing. I mean, I think for a lot of people, unbelievable is kind of just opening the door almost to considering the claims of Christianity.
Right.
And so I don't tend to see, people sort of after listening to one show becoming Christians or anything like that.
Right.
But certainly you see a lot of people for whom it's helped to lower the barriers, and people who once would have completely dismissed Christianity being willing to take it a lot more seriously. I've been having a kind of ongoing dialogue. In fact, I got him to write a blog for my show page recently with a guy in Australia called Dean, who's who for most of his life I think would have said he was a kind of atheist, pretty much, kind of accepted the prevailing cultural narrative on that. And it was really through discovering Unbelievable, our big conversation series especially, which has had thinkers on, that it kind of really opened up a new kind of whole dimension of thinking through these big issues and things. And he says that he's really, really changed the way he sees Christianity now. Now, he doesn't yet call himself a Christian, but he says he's starting to see that there's some kind of purpose in the universe. He understands more why people would want to believe this. And I just find that very encouraging to see people like Dean wanting to open up and explore in a real way the issues. And it's exciting when the show is facilitating that.
So what would be your advice about talking to someone who doesn't seem to have any interest in going deep? You know what I mean? They're just kind of apathetic. They've heard it all before. Do you have any any way that you would communicate with someone like that to get them to want to go deeper?
I think that's the most challenging thing, actually. I'm. It's easier in a way to have a conversation with a dogmatic atheist than a
Yeah, for sure.
apathetic agnostic who just isn't really interested, actually. So I think that is actually the toughest thing, because then you're just having to try and find a way of engaging that person. I mean, generally speaking, if someone is in that position, the thing that I would be seeking to do if I was wanting to engage them as regards Christianity is to find out what they are interested in. They may not think they're interested in religion, but actually most people have something that they treat kind of like in the place of religion.
Right. Yeah.
And it might be family, it might be some hobby, it might be music, it might be whatever. And that for me would be the starting place to talk about why do you get passionate about that? What's so important? What happens to you when you engage in that thing? And that might be the start of a conversation on why they find meaning in that, what the value is. And ultimately those conversations can point towards the ultimate source of meaning, the ultimate source of value. Again, you can't, in a way though, it's if there isn't a desire there to begin with, it's hard to stoke something which isn't there. And to some extent you just have to say, well, I'll do what I can, Lord, but until something happens, I guess, in this person's life that awakes them to want to explore and to investigate these things, you can't always make it happen for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting off the subject here, but I was just at the eye doctor today, and this guy's quite a famous optometrist, and
I think it's more
or ophthalmologist.
That's the one.
I knew he was something.
He was opto something.
But he's a marathon runner, and he's very I think he's an atheist, and he injured his knee because he runs so many marathons. And we're sitting in his office, and he's telling me about that. And I said, hey, would it be okay if I prayed for your knee? And he was like, yes. And he's there with this, this guy he's teaching. And he was very excited about the fact that I would pray for his knee. But I kind of left a little frustrated that I didn't go deeper than that. You know what I mean? It's like, I prayed for his knee, and you could tell he said, I feel like my knee's going to be better. But do you think that was a good, I'm kind of begging the question here, but
I would say praying for someone in public is like pretty deep as far as I'm concerned. That's if it comes to British culture, you've basically gone about as deep as you could possibly take it straight away.
You wouldn't even do that with your mother, I hear, in British culture. Is that true or not?
It would be rude.
Yeah.
I mean, no, all power to you though, and I applaud anyone who's got the boldness to kind of do that. And sometimes I wish I had more of that kind of boldness to sort of just flat out ask and offer prayer for someone who's in need. But yeah, I mean, I guess that proves the point that actually people are sometimes more open than we think they are.
Yeah, because he's a very famous guy.
Yeah.
But I had this voice in my head, pray for his knee. And it was so strong. I couldn't, I just thought, you want me to pray for your knee, and it was, but he was so open, and you could tell it really, really moved him and touched him.
Well, I guess, I think to me, it sounds like you responded to what you were being prompted to do. Now, as to whether you could have done more, who knows? But whatever happens, I think you've opened the door to this being a different kind of relationship now.
That's true.
Another opportunity to engage with him, and I think that's exciting. Yeah.
So, hey, Justin, you've had a lot of cool guests on, and a lot of them obviously, always coming from different perspectives, and some of them quite well-known names in atheism or neo-atheism, and just people who've written awesome books and going deep into these topics. And some of them you have come back various times, and there's a relationship. You can tell sometimes in the conversation, just there's a relationship there. Have you experienced seeing people who come and have these intense conversations that bringing change? And also connect to that, have you seen a change in the way kind of the secular mindset that is prominent around us and that you're bringing into your program to have those conversations. Have you seen that change over the time that you've been running these conversations? Have you sensed a change, even just culturally speaking, in the ideas that are being brought?
Well, I think on the individual level, it is lovely that over time, just having done the show for so long, and having engaged with some particular people a number of times in that time, you do inevitably develop a kind of friendship, and there's a sense in which, even though you're debating serious topics of disagreement, you can still be friendly and fun to some extent within that. And so that's great. Some of them, I would say, have changed their position over time. I've seen people who were quite antagonistic become less antagonistic. I've seen, some people who've been guests on the show have, completely changed their position, and that's great. I think inevitably it's so many factors come into play, don't they? And rarely is any individual ever persuaded on the basis of 1 hour of discussion on a show. It's going to be all kinds of factors in that person's life that are going to be making a difference, friends, family, personal situations, and everything else. And so I just see what I do and the friendships I develop with some of those folk as one small piece of the puzzle for most of them. In terms of the bigger picture, culturally, I do think the conversation, interestingly, has moved on. So 10 years ago, or maybe 12 now, Richard Dawkins brought out The God Delusion. That was kind of the big new atheist book. And it was kind of, I would say that the new atheism was kind of peaking around that time, actually. That was the ultimate expression, if you like, of that very dogmatic, very in-your-face, anti-theistic kind of stuff that people like Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and so on were all doing as well. Over 10 years on from that, I think the steam has kind of gone out of that movement to a large degree. I think it still exists, obviously, in corners of the internet, and people will still get very anti-theistic. But actually, the person that people are turning out for in the secular world more and more are people like Jordan Peterson. And those kind of,
who you've had on your program as well, right?
Yeah, who I've had on the show, and some of those other members of the so-called intellectual dark web, though that's a kind of a bit of a loose term for this grouping of people. But generally, I think the interest is now less on let's bash religion, but actually people acknowledging that, okay, maybe we were a bit too quick to dismiss religion, and it's actually it's quite helpful in some ways, and actually all that new atheist stuff sounded, they were nice orators, but actually everyone's still as depressed as they ever were. There's still a crisis of meaning. There's, it doesn't seem to have offered any answers at this point. And I think there is a move back to saying, well, what's religion got going for it? Not that we should believe it or anything, but maybe
something interesting.
Maybe there's some wisdom there. Maybe we need to reconsider it. And so that's an interesting conversation that's happening in those circles. And I've been kind of bringing on some of those people on my show to talk about that. Looking forward actually to having fairly soon on the show Douglas Murray, who's a UK kind of journalist and thinker. He's an atheist himself, but he's just written this really, really interesting good book called The Madness of Crowds, which is on the whole kind of intersectionality, woke politics, identity politics and such, and the way that he sees all of that kind of really going against freedom of speech. And he's an interesting character because although he's not a believer, he's an atheist, he sees the value of Christianity. He would be the first to say, we've lost something without Christianity. We don't have that narrative to guide us anymore. And people are basically now buying into all these other narratives to try and find their meaning, but it's actually quite a self-destructive impulse. And so I just think there's a really interesting, fruitful conversation going on that the church needs to be part of in that sort of sphere. And I'm quite excited by it. I think it's a really interesting development, and the God question never goes away. I think it's always remained there in some form or other.
Yeah,
from that crowd, have you thought of having Tom Holland on, the guy from Dominion? Because that guy would be crazy. Because just that same theme you're talking about.
I had Tom Holland on about a year and a half ago while he was writing Dominion, and he came on with N.T. Wright, who's a well-known sort of biblical theologian and New Testament scholar, and they had a wonderful conversation about what is effectively the subject of Tom Holland's new book, Dominion, the way that Christianity has effectively shaped the West and all our cultural values.
It's amazing.
But I've kept in touch with Tom since then, and we've actually just recorded, just a couple of weeks ago, another debate, but this time with much more of a kind of spiky counterpart to him, A.C. Grayling, who's quite a well-known atheist philosopher here in the UK, who basically is the complete opposite end of the spectrum to Tom Holland. So Tom Holland's sort of agnostic, more or less, when it comes to faith, but acknowledges the immense value of Christianity as a historian. A.C. Grayling is a sort of humanist philosopher who basically says Christianity never did anything good for us and we should forget it as soon as possible. And well, I can only tell you that show's coming out beginning of December, and it's one of the most fireworks I've ever had on a show between
Wow.
those people, because
check that out.
that was a, yeah, if you're interested in shows, that's one to watch. But Tom Holland's really super interesting. His book is very good, Dominion.
It is.
And I think he is part of a wave of people basically saying we dismissed Christianity far too quickly, and we all think we can just reinvent ourselves from scratch. And actually, no, we, as he says in the book, regardless of what you actually believe, we're all Christians when it comes to the way we act and live, because we've been completely shaped by the Christian culture that we've come out of. And that culture, you know, you can't just dismiss it in the way that some atheists want to.
Yeah, that's it kind of in some ways circles back to the original question I had, which is there a counter reaction to this culture that's suppressed opposite opinions? It's so polarized, as I said, that we live in a time where you distance yourself from anyone who thinks differently. And I think we're in the same way seeing kind of a reaction against that, where I think Christians can step into a place of felt need to facilitate conversations and bring people together who don't think the same thing. Because I think when any person I say that to instantly agrees with me. Yes, this is a need. We don't speak anymore. We put each other in categories. We go online, we bash each other, and there's no conversation. But what I find so interesting, and kind of the next question I have is, for those listening, apologetics can be intimidating, and it can be inaccessible depending on the kind of person that you are, and you might kind of distance yourself from it thinking it's an academic exercise. But to me, even hearing you discuss the shift sort of towards this, okay, we ditch religion, we're working out the consequences of a pretty bankrupt worldview, and now we're saying, well, maybe we got rid of it too soon, maybe there's something to this. That to me is reacting to culture and sort of finding those spaces where we can introduce God in a way that is compelling to a culture as it shifts. So how would you speak to someone, or how would you define or be an apologist for apologetics for someone that's saying, that's great, and I love that you have these really, really smart people on, but how is that relevant to me? What use does apologetics have in an everyday person's life that might be listening to this?
To be honest, I mean, the value for me of apologetics is not particularly for any specific arguments or kind of that kind of thing. I think there is value to that, but for me, it's more about being able to engage in conversations more confidently. And so a lot of the Christians I meet, the reason they like to live in a bubble where they don't have to engage too often with people who don't share their beliefs is because they're scared, because they find it too personally challenging to hear opinions which go so directly against their deeply held beliefs. But for me, the value of doing a show like Unbelievable has been like by kind of deliberately putting yourself in between these two competing points of view, you kind of quickly learn to just cope with that and to realize, okay, it's fine. People can believe completely different things to me or have big objections to my faith. And it's not going to sort of make my faith suddenly crumble or melt away. And when you've got good people on the other side, kind of making the defense of Christianity, it's just a really helpful way of realizing Christianity can stand on its own 2 feet. And actually, I can be a confident Christian when I'm entering those kinds of conversations myself. And you don't have to have this knee-jerk reaction of fear or running away or whatever. And so for me, that's the big value of apologetics. It just means that I think people can go out and not have to kind of just hang out in the crowds where people essentially agree with them, but where they feel quite comfortable sitting down with an atheist, a Muslim, or being perfectly friendly, not having to get irate or angry because they're saying things I disagree with, but simply be able to have a rational, calm conversation with someone, and that for me is a huge value, and it means that you can, you know, make friendships actually more easily because you're more secure in why you believe what you believe. So for me, it's actually the ability to actually go and have better conversations that is the big value of apologetics. Obviously, if you can bring people and persuade them and everything along the way, that's wonderful. But I mean, just one example is I was the next edition of my show is actually going to be me doing the apologetics thing. So I'm hosting the conversations, but I was recently involved in a debate at Oxford University with an online atheist called Stephen Woodford, who goes under the YouTube name Rationality Rules, and but he's a nice guy, and we get on together. Now we kind of had our differences in the debate, and he came in quite strong and I went in quite strong against him, but at the end of the day we were friends, we were friendly, and we went off and had a drink at the pub afterwards along with everyone else. So there's a sense in which I think you can it's possible to do that. It's possible to actually honestly disagree and, you know, be quite firm in your convictions and the to and fro, but still maintain a genuine friendship with people in those circumstances.
Yeah, and haven't we? But I think that's part of what we've lost in general, is that I don't think people are they don't have those skills. They're not being equipped to have those rational, calm discussions now with safe spaces and not being offended, and where the very idea that your views are so inextricably linked now with your value that you can't possibly challenge someone's views without challenging their worth. And so don't you think it's even a deeper cultural problem beyond religion? We just can't.
Oh, yeah.
We can't even have these discussions with anybody.
It's fascinating because the same person I just mentioned, Stephen, he got in a lot of hot water over a video he made as an atheist, kind of critiquing transgender people who go into sports. So effectively, especially in women's sports, where there appears to be a number of transgender women sort of winning all the prizes and whatever. And anyway, he did a video and he got some of his facts wrong, and he got leapt on for that by the transgender community. And he said, you know, to me, what he kind of experienced there was 10 times worse than any flack he's had from the Christian community, you know, for the many videos he's done critiquing Christianity. So it's kind of like, it's interesting that those issues where people are getting so easily offended in a way, and see these identities as so ultimately kind of integral to them that anyone who dares to question it is immediately the enemy. It's interesting that is actually creating more cohesion, interestingly, between some people who are on the receiving end of that and the Christians who actually have kind of got used to getting criticized anyway. So they're kind of like, you know, well, hey, we don't mind. We can take it and just and get on with atheists, even if they, you know, disagree and so on. So it's a fascinating time to be living in. I now have, you know, I have had programs with some of these atheist folk who are critiquing some aspects of identity politics and everything, who say we feel more in line, in tune with many Christians now than some people in the secular world, because we feel like they've now gone off the deep end with a kind of different kind of religious fervor. And so one case in point, again, it's a show that will be coming out quite shortly, but I did a live dialogue between Professor John Lennox and Dave Rubin, who's quite a popular YouTube host. And Dave Rubin, again, is one of these people who's concerned at losing freedom of speech because of political correctness and woke politics and everything else. And he said, in this, you know, church where we were doing it, Calvary Chapel, primarily with Christians in the audience, he said, I feel more comfortable here than I do on many campuses and places like that. He said, I feel that there's more tolerance here than there is in a lot of parts of the secular world. And I just think that's great if the church can be a place where we say, we're not afraid to have the discussion. When it's no problem if you come in here and disagree with us, that's fine. We're used to it. We're gonna and we're gonna treat you graciously.
But we need
That's
to
so good.
teach. Part of it though is we do need to teach our people though, right? Because I mean, we've been releasing a new video series called "Is There More?" and the whole heart of it is to create content that poses questions and challenges secular assumptions, does it in a way that creates conversation, is presuppositional. But I posted one of these videos, and someone, the whole heart of it was a discussion we had with 8 non-believers, and we just had discussions about the major questions of life. We called it, it was a focus group essentially, and it was great. It was amazing. I mean, they were so open. It went on for 2 hours. They didn't want to leave when it was over. It was the sense of community that we established even in that context was so cool. And the whole first video was about the origins of life. How did we get here? And someone replied to my video with, just read Genesis 1. And I'm like, well, that's not going to create an environment where a secular person is going to feel welcome. There is a degree where the cultural gap needs to close, and we need to educate our people a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not saying that all Christians or all churches are the same in that respect. And you're absolutely right. I do feel though that gap is closing.
Sure.
And that an older generation of kind of, hey, just the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it. That's not enough for most Christians of a slightly younger generation. They are being forced because of the internet, basically, to look for defenses for their faith. That's why apologetics, I think, has taken off really in the last decade or two in the church. You can't really be a Christian who's at any level engaged outside of the Christian bubble, certainly not in the UK at least, without really engaging at some level with people who are different from you, and having the grace and the ability to do that without just simply flinging Bible verses at people. So those people, of course, that still exists, but I think that form of kind of reactionary Christianity is inevitably dying out because we're having to adapt to an increasingly secular culture, and you've got to be able to have these conversations.
So, Justin, what triggers you?
What triggers me?
Yeah.
The way Americans pronounce words like aluminium, that triggers me enormously.
Yeah, well, besides that. Come on, you're not getting out of this question. Come on.
No, that's valid. That's valid. He might need to go to a safe space now.
Yeah, he probably does. Yeah.
I'm genuinely very hard to trigger, quite honestly. I think
is why you do what you do.
I was going to say exactly that. It is because, I for whatever reason, God has given me a fairly placid, sanguine nature where I don't get easily angered by things. And so people often write into the show and say, how do you remain so calm when someone's saying such and such?
Yeah.
And it's just...
And you are chemically free, right?
As far as I know, yes. So I don't know that it's. I guess it's helpful to have that kind of disposition when you are moderating a show where every week you're trying to bring people with different perspectives on. Inevitably, I kind of obviously I have opinions. I am a Christian. I do. I sometimes probably get a little bit more sort of. I suppose involved when sometimes if there's an issue where I really feel the Christian faith or a particular way of looking at an argument is being misrepresented by the atheist, I might sort of step in and say, come on, you've got to do better than that. But by and large, I am one of those people who is by nature a peacemaker. And I think that's hopefully has helped me to be a decent moderator, because I try and bring out the best ideally from both sides and sort of facilitate something where you're not just having a butting of heads, but hopefully you're going to get some kind of interesting dialogue out of it. But that's not to say I don't enjoy the drama from time to time. It's fun at the end of the day to have a lively exchange, and I'm all for doing that when it's necessary.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think I really have enjoyed and got excited to see the way that you're able to engage in the conversation through the conversations you bring onto your show, and really have a voice into some of the key topics. And seeing that also in the UK scene is really cool. Really love seeing that. And actually, just related to that, one last thing as a mission, that's a lot what our heart is to speak into the culture, to bring the message to where people often don't hear it, and in a way that they can understand. And being from the UK, but I haven't lived there for a long time now, and we've started going back there with our mission with Steiger, actually doing a few things. What's the scene like in the UK right now? What do you feel like is the need for missions, for church? Where do you see great things happening? Where do you see real need in this in that setting in the UK right now for the gospel, for people to find Jesus in the UK today?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I've got the bird's eye view on the whole thing, but what I do see often is some very good things, some very hopeful things. Often people point at the statistics and the decline in church going and the latest survey or whatever and say the church is dying on its legs. But actually, I have the privilege through where I'm positioned at Premier Christian Radio in the UK. We see a lot of churches, ministries, people coming through the doors. And there are some incredibly brilliant things going on in the UK. There are, I would say, what to me look like the green shoots of revival in different parts of the country. Places where you've got church networks like HTB who are planting into sort of congregations that are failing or dying, but are then seeing them come alive again. And these thriving city centre churches starting to develop in various parts of the country. I think there's an exciting kind of unity among a lot of the churches where, despite their differences, they've got a common goal of wanting to see the UK transformed. I think there's a kind of there is a genuine tipping point, I think, that we're approaching, where people are beginning to realise that more and more technology, more and more choice, more and more secularism isn't doing what people promised it would do. People are just as depressed, just as
more so, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what the statistics tell us, and I think inevitably, kind of sometimes things have to get really bad before they get better. And I think the church will be there when it does, and the church is there. I see so many churches who are filling the gap in so many ways in towns and cities across the UK, often doing it quietly and without making a fanfare of it. But actually, when push comes to shove, they're critical. They are really needed in what they're doing. So I see lots of positive things in that way. And although sometimes if you read the headlines, you can get the idea that it's all going to hell in a handbasket, I think there is just a lot of Christians who are faithfully doing and praying and working together in ways that you may see the fruit of in several years' time, maybe 10 years, 20 years, who knows? But God's not finished with the UK, I would say.
I would say that Luke triggers me. I don't know if that's
yeah.
So
that's why I'm on this. That's why I'm on this show.
Yeah, and I guess, Justin, I asked you that question because I thought maybe you would say the same thing, and you probably secretly are feeling that way.
Yeah,
about
and
Luke.
here's the thing: his Wi-Fi isn't bad. He really just is fuzzy.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, I'm just like that all the time.
But
He's
just
like Sasquatch.
Justin, I got a text from Nigel, and he said that he's your #1 fan. He loves your show.
Wow.
You know Nigel?
Which Nigel is this?
He just goes
He's
by
from
Nigel.
the UK. They're all called Nigel.
Yeah.
No, he's not. He's Kiwi.
Actually, this guy. But
yeah. So
New Zealand
Nigel
is just a colony of the UK.
So he wants to know what you feel about the.
I got a New Zealand passport.
He's part of this initiative called Releasing Lions into Urban Areas, and he wants to know if you would support that on your show.
I'll be literally releasing physical lions into urban areas.
Yeah, he's been on this crusade for a long time, and he feels like, it's like you're out walking around and all of a sudden, hey, what happened to Billy? Well, lion got him. You know what I mean? And he thinks that would add to the atmosphere of the city.
Well, potentially it could be something we could rally around as a culture.
You know what I mean? It could bring this kind of unity where everyone could hold hands together in the forest.
We're a deeply divided country at the moment with Brexit, and I think lions are the obvious way to bring us together again. So you
would support this initiative?
I would definitely, absolutely endorse letting lions roam around in public in the UK.
That's
Yeah, and I would suggest you have sort of a debate about it on your show, but I don't think you'll find anyone who'll take
No.
the against
I mean,
position.
who on
And-
earth would object
Yeah.
to such
And
an
one
obvious-
last thing is, so we want to have Jordan Peterson on our podcast. So why aren't you helping us
Oh,
do
yeah.
that? What's up with that?
Oh yeah, you should help us.
Yeah. Well,
Come on, put a word in for us, Justin.
I'll
Use your
I'll
clout.
I'll say this. I happened to get Jordan Peterson just before he went stratospheric.
Oh, really?
I somehow managed to wangle about an hour of his time. This was just after he was just about to release his book 12 Rules for Life. This was a
Wow, perfect
big
timing.
Yeah,
event.
seriously.
And in that same little sort of tour that he was doing in the UK in early January 2018, a couple of days later he went and had that interview that went viral with Kathy Newman on Channel 4,
Right.
where he had kind of
Oh yeah.
engagement with a very kind of aggressive Channel 4 newswoman. And after that, it was like everyone was talking about Jordan Peterson. And I was like, oh, well, I got him before he went off the charts. So it's a lot more difficult to get him these days.
So is this
your
you're giving us an excuse then? Is what you're
basically, yes.
Look,
I mean,
he's already elevated the intellectual credit of this show. He said both sanguine and
Exactly.
stratospheric, which those two S words have never been uttered on this
We've never
podcast.
used them.
So you've done enough for us already, Justin. We're greatly
Wow, that's
appreciative.
very
of
We're
it.
kind.
grateful.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah.
it's been an honor to have you on, man. Thanks.
Yeah, keep up the
Yeah.
good work. And
Wow, thank
again,
you, guys.
unbelievable. It's very appropriately named. Great podcast. It's been an encouragement to me.
Me too.
Got to be honest with you, every time you don't talk about the abortion topic very much. This often got very serious, but man, the people that debate the pro-choice position, I'm always like, maybe there isn't someone with a rational perspective on that, but it's just ridiculous. I don't know
Yeah,
these
I mean,
people.
I guess that's one where I would have to agree with you. And the some of those, I mean, you always try and bring on the best spokespeople for either side. I would say though on that one that I even find a lot of atheists actually. Doesn't just split down Christian atheist lines. That one, a lot of atheists who are quite pro-life and can see the points that a lot of the Christians we bring on are making. There were two very different shows I had on that this past year. One was between two women, and it was a more kind of measured debate in our video studio. One of them being one of the leaders of one of the biggest abortion sort of providers in the UK, BPAS, and
I listened to that one. Yeah.
and she was engaging with someone who was former Planned Parenthood person who had come over to the UK to do some speaking as a pro-life position. The second one was a lot more, I would say, probably less fruitful in as much as the pro-choice person was simply basically repeating the same thing again and again throughout. But it's a woman's choice, whatever the guest opposite her had to say. And that's I suppose an example of where you can't always tell in advance how good a guest will be for the position, whether it be the one you agree with or not. But yeah.
I have
Anyway.
another suggestion from a guest. You should
Yeah.
have David. You should have David come on. Unbelievable. And
I'm
have
too
a
busy.
conversation with Ozzy. You should have him come on and have a conversation with Ozzy Osbourne.
Okay.
About
That
what?
would be really interesting.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, you'd have to change the name of your show to Forgettable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd have to come up. If this is no longer unbelievable, the show is called Forgettable.
Look, Justin, see, you're getting an idea of why I am the host of the show, because it just turns into incessant rambling. Luke you can tell why he's on a
you can tell why
limit.
he triggers us, right?
Yeah, he triggers
Yeah.
us. So we got to move on before the triggering reaches a point of no return.
Yeah.
But hey,
Thanks,
thank
Justin.
you. I know it's late there, and
No,
I'm sure
it
there's
was-
some
it
sort
was
of
an
tea and
absolute
crumpets
pleasure to
awaiting.
be with you guys. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks,
Yeah, no.
Justin.
Thank you so much. If
Yeah.
you check out, like I
Let's
already
do-
said, check out Unbelievable Podcast, iTunes. I'm sure it's everywhere. Google it, you'll find it. How can they follow you, find you personally?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at UnbelievableJB, and you can find the Facebook page as well for the show. Just look up Unbelievable with a question mark. And we're on podcasts. We've also got a YouTube channel as well, which has grown quite a lot in the last year or so.
Cool.
So yeah, just look for Unbelievable with a question mark. The only problem is now, I used to say I'll just type in Unbelievable into Google, but now all you get is that new Netflix documentary series.
Yeah, it's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
So do not go to the Netflix series.
No, that's
Yeah,
not
not
what we're
that one.
talking about.
They've kind of ruined our search engine optimization.
Oh,
But anyway,
yeah.
we'll find another way. So yeah.
Well, Is There More? Our new channel is a Drake song. So we
Wow.
shanked it too. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Provoke and Inspire podcast. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll talk to you next time. Peace.